Thank you. If it's all right, we're going to move on to Garrett McAllister, and because we wanted to really give a lot of time today to be able to hear what's happening with the future land use planning, and kind of how we'd like to approach this, if it's okay. So we're going to give Garrett some time, and we'll introduce him. Then we're going to ask kind of clarifying Q&As to make sure we all really understand what he's telling us. And then we'll go into kind of questions and discussions. Garrett, does that work for you?
That works great.
Great. And I'm sorry I don't have an intro prepared for you. So Garrett, if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about your role, and then you'll be able to share the screen and stuff as you need.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Garrett McAllister. I'm the Community Development Manager for Gallatin County, mostly focusing on long-range planning and policy creation, things like that. I've been with the county for about almost 5 years, I guess, this summer. By way of Oregon, by way of Florida before that, by way of University of Montana and Missoula before that. So I graduated from UM and then kind of did a big lap around the country and came back to Montana 5 years ago. So are there any other questions, or should I just jump into the presentation? This group is bigger than I was expecting.
But they were very excited to hear from you.
Yeah,
So thank you. If it's okay, and I just want to mention in chat again, the 319. So if you guys have stuff, keep adding. If it's all right, let's let Garrett go into his presentation. And if it's all right, unless there's something you completely don't understand, let's hold and then ask clarifying questions. Does that work for you, Garrett?
that sounds great.
Okay.
All right, let me share my screen. All right, hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes.
Okay. Um, Oh, starting at the end. There we go. Okay, so future land use map project. So a couple of years ago, just to give even a little bit more background, the county adopted or updated their growth policy, which is essentially just the comprehensive land use plan for the county. And in that document, we identified a need to develop a future land use map. These are tools that communities use to kind of help envision the future of growth and development in their communities. And so this is a project, like I said, that was identified as a short-term action of the growth policy. It's required by Montana state law, and it's really sort of the community's visual guide to future growth. And it really ideally should bring together elements, all the different sort of policy elements of the growth policy, natural resources, agriculture, housing, infrastructure, all those things. And it's kind of a key piece of this, I think, is that it's a map of what the community wants to have happen. It's not necessarily a prediction of existing conditions, right? So there's kind of a values-based component to this project. The housing strategy is the second component of this project and kind of goes hand in hand with the future land use map and is funded in part by the state of Montana CDBG grant. And it's a project that kind of rose pretty quickly to the top of our priority list over the last couple of years for obvious reasons, I think, to everyone here, with the sharp increase in the cost of housing in Gallatin County and just the growth and all that. So the intent is to kind of join these two projects together to the greatest extent possible, as they really do influence each other. So just kind of talking a little bit more about the project need, the projected population growth and development numbers are in Gallatin County are really significant. And just to be clear, when we're talking about Gallatin County, we're talking about everywhere outside of incorporated municipalities, Bozeman, Belgrade, Three Forks, Manhattan, West Yellowstone. Those are the incorporated areas. The county is everything else, including Big Sky. The second piece is that the existing land use map that we have is pretty out of date and doesn't really reflect the work that we did on the growth policy. Additionally, there's a need to, as I mentioned before, accommodate residential growth, commercial needs, protect open space, provide for industrial lands, all those things, and do so in a manner that's consistent with community goals. And then we just don't have a county housing plan. So I think that's an important component to this as well. So this really is intended to build on what's been done. There's a lot of text here. Sorry, I probably should have cut this down a little bit, but it's really, you know, we did a lot of public outreach as part of the growth policy, and we got, I think, a really good understanding of community values and what people care about, what people want to protect, what people want to see more of, where there's opportunities for growth, all those sorts of things. And so we don't want to recreate the wheel. Obviously, we're going to do public outreach as part of this process, but a lot of that foundational background work has been done. And so this is the way we're looking at it, is this is a step in implementation of implementing our adopted growth policy, and doing so in maybe a little bit more tangible way with the map. And then on the housing side of things, the goal is to really document housing gaps and needs, and then define a role for the county in housing. I think that's kind of a big unanswered question for the county is, what is our role in this housing crisis? Where can we help? Where is appropriate to put housing? Where is it not appropriate to put housing? How can we collaborate with the cities and what they're doing? So some of those questions, I think, are getting answered through this process as well. Again, like I said before, collaborating with the cities and the broader region, and lots of different and diverse stakeholder groups as well, this group being one of them. I think that's important and an important goal for this project. And then establishing a foundation for future updates to the county zoning regulations and subdivision regulations and other regulations. I mean, this is, as I was saying before, we're kind of working through implementation, and this is between the growth policy and zoning. This is kind of that middle step. And so once we complete the future land use map and housing, zoning reform is an important next step in the implementation process. So this is a quick timeline of where we're at. It is the end of February. So we're in the kind of just getting into the community outreach phase for round one. I'll talk more about what that looks like here a little bit later on, but we've done kind of our foundation work. We've done an internal policy review, and we've kind of built these land use profiles. And I think the goal now is to go out into the community and validate some of this information and get some feedback. And then after that, moving into more kind of future forward thinking, future land use map development and housing strategies. So just broadly, some of the key aspects of the approach, as I already mentioned, understanding our adopted land use policies, understanding our growth policy, understanding our community plans, all those sorts of high-level policy documents, making sure that that they're all talking to one another and that they're all influencing this project. And then the part that we're in currently is understanding our current land use profile as it exists right now in the county. And so I put a link here, and I'll just open this up. Hopefully this will work. So this is not live, so you guys are getting a little sneak peek of the project, or this part of the project that we're working on. But we're building an existing land use profile of the county. And so we have a whole bunch of information, a whole bunch of data. If you want to ask questions about the data after, we can do that. I'll do my best, but there's a lot of data. And we're using a bunch of different things like the sensitive lands plan that the city of Bozeman did recently. That's incorporated into this. Our own county primary criteria maps are incorporated into this. But you can see that we have sort of these existing land use categories. And again, the idea here is to just get a snapshot of what is currently on the ground and happening in our community,
Garrett,
county.
No,
Yeah.
I think I'm still seeing the slideshow and not the
Oh,
sneak peek. Is that the case for
okay.
others?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. Let me fix that. Let's see.
Sorry to interrupt you. You're on a roll there.
No, that's okay. I this this is good. Let's see. How about
It's just a peak, Lily. Come on. It's not a whole screen.
Yes, it was like really small, maybe. It's just
all right, let me try this again.
Oh, we saw it for a second, looked like.
Yeah, let's do this. Sorry. How's that? Can we see existing land use? There we go. Now I can see what you're seeing. Okay. All right. Technology is hard sometimes. Okay. Existing land use. So back to yeah, this is just kind of a snapshot of what is currently happening in the county. And on these maps, they're sort of like a story map. And again, this will all be on the project website in the near future, so you can look at these maps. We're going to provide space to have comments, so you'll actually be able to click on the map, provide comments, kind of the typical thing that government does with public outreach and particularly with maps, right? But I kind of wanted to just show the work that we're doing because I'm kind of excited about it. I think it's kind of a great resource, but and just really helps us understand what's happening in the county in sort of and it's grounded in a lot of data. We all kind of know intuitively what's happening, but it's nice to be able to really dig into the data. So we split the county into 7 sub areas based on similar land use patterns and topography considerations. So we have like our rural and working lands. And if you click on that tab, it'll kind of zoom in, and that's mostly up here in like the north part of the county. If you can see my cursor, north and west part of the county here. We have a couple of pockets here that we didn't have a great name for. We called it unplanned development. A lot of this was sort of subdivision exemptions in Ponderosa Pines and Clarkston area. And then we have foothill/mountain development that's kind of around Bridger and the Bangtails, and then also down on the South Gallatin foothills. And then we have what we're calling our Triangle Plus area, which is kind of our urbanized, high growth area. We have our smaller unincorporated communities, Willow Creek, Amsterdam, Churchill, and Gallatin Gateway. Then we have Big Sky, which is kind of its own animal, as everyone knows. And then our recreational development is what we're calling it. And that would be like everything in the canyon that's not Big Sky. And same thing with Hebgen Basin, way down south. This is a lot of public land down there, as everybody knows, hence all the dark green. So from there, you can explore all of the different maps and the sub areas. So if we want to look at ag lands, we can click on ag lands. We can zoom in on any sub area we want and kind of get a breakdown of existing land, right? So we have prime farmland, in this case, farmland if irrigated. We also have it broken down by property type. So if it's classified ag land, that gets its own designation. If it's a state parcel, that gets its own designation. And so on and so forth through all these different topic areas. I won't go through all of them because there's a bunch of them, but wildlife and wildlife habitat, local services is another one, our sensitive lands and resources is another one. So kind of excited about these maps. Like I said, they'll be going live soon and there'll be opportunity to comment on them and explore those maps. So let me reshare the presentation. And there we are. Okay. So from the current land use profiles and this this kind of piece of the project that I was just talking about, we then will move into kind of identifying areas with where there's more heavier development constraints and areas where there are more development opportunities. and do a little bit of like a suitability analysis. And then from there, kind of develop the future land use map. So there's kind of a lot of steps, but each step I think sort of makes sense as you go along the process. And then, as I was saying before, once we adopt the future land use map, that has implications on our regulatory framework from there, things like zoning, subdivision, etc. And then, of course, throughout the entire process, it's important to have lots of community engagement and feedback. And so at the end of March, like I said, we're doing our first round of outreach. We have 4 different kind of open house events across the county. We're doing one in Bozeman, one in Manhattan, one in Gallatin Gateway, and one in Big Sky. And there will be more information on the project website about those if you'd like to attend those in the coming weeks. So the project website, if I didn't already tell everyone, is envisiongallatin.com, and I can even put that in the chat if that's helpful. But that's where everything will live, and all of the updates will take place. So going back to the future land use map, I just threw in a couple of examples for funsies here just to see if anybody kind of has looked at a future land use map or knows much about it. I picked this one because this is the city of Plantation in Broward County, Florida, where I was a land use planner for the county. And this is kind of what I would consider a little bit more of a traditional future land use map. You can see down in the left corner in the where the different land uses are. So there's like estate, and that's sort of low density. I think low density in Florida is 1 unit per acre. And then, sort of moving up in density from there. And then there's activity center, which is kind of a mix of a bunch of different uses and typically adjacent to a major road network, office park, industrial, things like that. It's pretty basic, but it gives you kind of an idea of where different types of land use go. And it's dependent on infrastructure and services and things like that, right? And then, of course, zoning is more prescriptive from there. And then this is a little bit less traditional, but an interesting future land use map. I think I pulled this from somewhere in North Carolina, if I remember. But this has a little bit more of a mix. There's kind of like the downtown core in red, and there's some commercial pockets in that kind of pink color. One of the things I thought was interesting about this one too is that all the stuff in dark green is just considered reserve. It doesn't really say parks or open space or public land. It's just generally reserve land, which I think means don't touch it. Especially up here on the north part where it looks like there's some kind of watershed or something happening up here. And then the other interesting piece about this is there's these growth strategy tiers, tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. And that's kind of like the crosshatch. I didn't really dig into the details of what that means, but my assumption here is that, tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 is just kind of like future intensity of development. And capacity to take on future development. And I'm sure there's some sort of suitability analysis associated with those different growth tiers. So the moral of the story here is there's kind of a bunch of different ways you can do future land use maps. And like I said, there's this traditional way, and then there's these increasingly kind of creative ways to do future land use mapping. And there's other ways that I haven't even shown here on the map or as examples. So I don't know what our final product will look like. I think that remains to be seen a little bit. And the process, I think, in part is going to drive the outcome a little bit. So that's more or less what I have. That's kind of a high level overview of the future land use map. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's a key planning document that was discussed at length in the growth policy and is kind of on our table as a short-term task. So the growth policy was adopted in 2021, and we're scheduled to get this project adopted at the end of this year, 2024. So we're in that 0 to 5 year time frame. So I'm excited about that, and I pat myself on the back for that one, because I feel like in government, you're like, you set a goal and then 10 years later, you're like, we should have done that. Anyway, so like I said too, one of the major goals of the project is to engage with municipalities, agencies, stakeholders, all that good stuff, and to coordinate on future growth and development. There's my contact information, and I'm happy to answer questions.